Hi, welcome back to my channel, and as you can see, I have had my baby. Today, I'm gonna be going over my delivery and birth story. She did come early, so she was supposed to be born in late April, and she didn't even come in April, so she came a lot earlier than we thought. Before I get into all of this, if you aren't into like too much detail, you get queasy or you're just not into this type of stuff, I would just skip this video. But I will just go ahead and get started with the day that this all started. So the night that I went into labor, I was already like ready for bed and brushed my teeth in my pajamas. I had my retainers on. We were not expecting for her to come so early, so I was doing my normal like night routine. I get in bed and then I think, oh wait, I need to go use the restroom before I sleep or else I'm gonna be up in like 30 minutes. My water broke on the toilet, so I knew it wasn't me going pee because I had just peed. And this was kind of a different feeling. I felt kind of like a pop sensation down there and then a drizzle, and it wouldn't stop. I call out to my husband and I had told him I was gonna poop, and he's like, I don't really want to go in there. Aren't you pooping? And I say, no, I think my water just broke. And it was kind of pinkish and it would still come in, like it was still drizzling. And so then he says, we need to go to the hospital because I'm still preterm. And so then I say, okay, I'm gonna call the hospital. It's after hours, so I get sent straight to the nurses line, and they just ask me what happened, how far along I am, and with all the information, they said that they'll call me back. But then they end up not calling me back after 20 minutes of waiting, so then I call them again and I say, hey, I'm just gonna go to the hospital. So then we rushed to the hospital, and luckily, because it was so late in the night, there were no cars on the road. At this point, I'm not even having contractions. And so we walk all the way from the parking garage to the hospital, and we walk in like nothing's happened. And they say that they'll triage me and just see if it was even my water breaking, which by that point I had known that it was my water breaking for the past 30 minutes, but they said that they had to check. They put us in triage, and my triage nurse gets like a swab, like a little cotton swab, and swabs the inside down there, and then says this test should come back in like 10 minutes, but for the time being you just need to stay here and we're gonna monitor you. They put like the belly bands on me, and those monitor contractions and the fetal heartbeat. As soon as she puts the monitor on me, she says, are you feeling this contraction? And I was like, what? I am not feeling anything. Like, I feel completely normal. I don't feel any sort of contracting, anything. And she says, you're contracting, and it's pretty, like, it's a pretty big contraction too. And so we were really surprised. Like, my husband and I were so surprised that I was already contracting because I didn't feel anything. Anyways, we wait for that test to come in. Obviously it's positive, and it is my water that was broken and leaking. So then they say that I can't leave, which was kind of a nightmare for me because my whole plan going into labor was that I would labor at home as much as I can and then go to the hospital, because if you go into the hospital too early, then there's so many interventions that can happen. Not always, but more likely. And so it was kind of the worst case scenario for me. They finally give us our own room since they told me I can't leave and I'm in labor. And that's where everything kind of like calms down. We're just like waiting, I guess, for my contractions to get more and more closer together. By this point, my contractions were every 5 to 6 minutes and very consistently going on for like the past hour. My nurse didn't want to check me because my water had broken. They don't want to introduce contaminations if your water broke because there's nothing protecting the baby. And they said they'll check me in 4 hours, and if by that point I haven't progressed, like there's no dilation or anything like that, they're going to start Pitocin. And if your water breaks, the baby has to come out within 24 hours, or else it introduces too many like you could get an infection. It could just get really bad. The 4 hours passes by. I'm still not feeling my contractions at this point, but I can see them on the monitor and they're going off every 3 to 4 minutes. And they told me that when they check me, it doesn't matter how many centimeters dilated I am, they're more worried about my effacement. And I think effacement is just how thinned out your cervix is. And they said, if you're not more than 80% thinned out, we're gonna start Pitocin. And so I said, okay, like, I don't want to say no because this baby does need to come out. And if I'm not dilated or effaced, like, that's kind of a problem. And for first time moms, it takes a while for the baby to come out. And so I said, okay, please check me. And they checked me. It didn't hurt. A lot of people say that getting checked hurts, but it didn't hurt for me. And I think it's because of how dilated I was already. I was 3.5 centimeters dilated and 80% effaced. And the nurse said, we don't need to start Pitocin because it's looking pretty good. But because they didn't check me before this, they said, we don't know if you're progressing very fast. We don't know if you came in already at 3 centimeters and you've been stuck at 3 centimeters. So we'll check again in another 4 hours. In my head, I just told myself, I'm gonna do everything that I can to make sure that whenever I do have a contraction, I'm relaxing my body and breathing very like calmly so that my body can just like stretch and get this baby to get lower and lower. And so that's what I did. For the next 4 hours, I just breathed through every contraction. By this point, I was feeling them, but it wasn't painful. Like I could do everything that I normally can while I was having these contractions. So then the 4 hours passes and my contractions are getting pretty rough. And this entire time, I'm just walking around the entire hospital ward and just trying to get my body to like do its thing. I'm doing stretches, I'm breathing, I'm doing lunges. I'm literally doing everything that I can on this freaking hospital floor. I legit did not see any other patient on that floor, even though there were like 8 other women giving birth that day. My husband had to leave the hospital. This entire time he had been with me, but he had to leave the hospital because our dog, who is a puppy, was home alone and needed to be fed and go out and things like that. And so then he leaves. It hasn't exactly been like enough time for them to check me yet, but I like called the nurse in and I was like, hey, can you just check me because I'm in a lot of pain. And so then they come check me and they say, you're like almost there. You're like 7-8 centimeters fully effaced. Like you're almost there. The baby's head is in a -1 position. We talked pain management. She asked me what I wanted and I had requested an epidural at this point. So in my birth plan, before I even got admitted into the hospital, when we were in triage, they had asked me what my plan was for pain management. And I had said, I do not want any pain management except for maybe like nitrous oxide, which is just laughing gas, because I wanted to go as natural as I could. But by the time I was 7-8 centimeters dilated, it was so painful. Not to the point where I felt like I couldn't bear it, but it was to the point where I didn't want to bear it anymore. And because I was 7-8 centimeters dilated and not like 9-10, I knew I couldn't make it to 9-10 without being in so much pain. And I just didn't want that experience. Like I wanted my birth experience to be calm and not panicky. And by that point, I was kind of panicking. And when you have fear and you're in labor, it's just not a good mix. So that is why I requested the epidural. And by this point, everything's going so fast. Like, my husband arrives back at the hospital. I tell him I'm getting the epidural. And within like 5 minutes of him arriving, the anesthesiologist just comes in. So that was really nice. And then within like 30 to 40 minutes of me getting my epidural, I was at a 10. So it went really fast and I was ready to push. Pushing was kind of unnatural for me. Like, I didn't know how to push. So it was weird. And everyone told me not to hold my breath and to like not to purple push, but that's what the nurses kept telling you to do. And once I got to pushing, she came out pretty quickly, but I think it took over 1 full hour from like being at a 10 to her coming out. So then she comes out and my like first thought when she came out was, I need to hear her cry to know that everything's okay, because she's like, it's still early. We don't know if she can breathe on her own. But as soon as she came out with the loudest cry. She was crying so hard and she looked amazing. I did tear. That was my one thing that I didn't want. I didn't want to tear, but I did end up tearing. I had a 1st-degree tear, I think. My husband cut the cord and then she was placed on my chest immediately. We did do delayed cord clamping. At my hospital, they only do 60 seconds, but I requested 90 seconds and they were completely fine with that. The reason why I requested for 90 seconds is because the goal is that her blood from the cord gets to her body. And it was looking like by 90 seconds, it was pretty much good. So that's when they clamped the cord and she was on my chest the whole time for the full hour after she was born. And then they measured her and everything and she never left our room. So everything was good. She didn't have to go to the NICU even though she was early. And that whole like birthing experience was so magical and so surreal. Like, fully understand why women tell me like giving birth is so addicting, because that experience is just so magical, even though it's like painful and crazy at times. I'm really glad that I went into birth naturally and didn't have to like get induced or anything, because that was also one of my fears. I had a lot of fears this pregnancy, and it was, the way that everything happened was just amazing, and so I'm very grateful. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that by watching this video you've learned a little bit about birth and delivery and maybe can relate to some of these things, or will be looking forward to your own birth and just want to hear a positive experience. But I am grateful and I will see you in the next video. Bye.